to people who've been around for a long time, a lot of this stuff is very clear. But to new people, it's not very clear. So I've been trying to make a presentation to clarify what OpenEmbedded and the Yocto project are and how we got here. And it's sort of a long, tedious story, but it's an important one, and there are a lot of lessons to be learned along the way. All right. So a lot of times this talk is targeted at people who don't know what a build system for embedded devices is. So OpenEmbedded started, building for embedded devices, and we have three basic principles, which should be familiar to everyone here, but it gets confused a lot, and I just like to repeat them as often as I can. So we have the concept of a machine, which is a piece of hardware, a distribution, which is a set of programs designed for some specific purpose. And, typical, like focused for completely embedded devices with no screen, or having a screen. So distribution, you can choose whether or not X is enabled, things like that. And then you have the concept of an image, which is a particular file system, for example, built for a machine and a distribution that has the actual implementation of what you're trying to do. And the idea is that these are completely orthogonal, that an image can build for any machine or distribution, at least that supports the features needed by the image. So this should all be fairly clear to everyone here, but I love to repeat that. I skipped. Okay, so that's where OpenEmbedded came from. It's just a simple project that grew incredibly. And the Yocto project was basically, if you look at the Linux Foundation today, it basically exists to host collaborative projects. 2010 or so, when this started, the idea of the Linux Foundation, a collaborative project, it basically didn't exist. The Linux Foundation exists these days, is basically a member company supported organization. To be incredibly detailed, it's a 501c6, which is a nonprofit organized for the benefit of the members, and the members are companies. So membership in the Yocto project is limited to Linux Foundation members, which is pretty typical for their collaborative projects now. There are 3 membership levels: silver, gold, and platinum. And basically the difference is how much you pay. And the reason they're paying is it's giving the project support, financial support. Testing hardware, and we'll talk about this later, is testing has always been a problem for open source projects. And you look at things like kernel CI and things, is collaborative testing projects are hard. And a good part of the budget actually goes into testing hardware. This project is also paying Richard Purdy directly to be the project architect, Michael Halstead to do IT work, and Steve Sackerman to support the LTS, long-term stable release. And we're also paying Bootlin for documentation and build integration work. So they're keeping up with the documentation, which is one of the strengths of the Yocto project, and helping with the keeping track of the auto builder and fighting bugs there. So that was sort of the history of the Yocto project, and I did these in reverse order for some reason. So OpenEmbedded started out a very long time ago at this point. So don't be angry if I get this wrong, because I wasn't here. I know most of the guys who were around in those days. Chris Larson, I believe, is still working for Mentor. Mickey is somewhere in Germany, and Holger Schurig I haven't seen in years. But these guys came together, and they'd all been working on embedded Linux for various handhelds that were running around at the time. So we had the Sharp Zara show up that was running Linux, and it was flashable. And this created a lot of excitement at the time because people were replacing the Linux applications provided by Sharp with a thing called OpenZaris, and there was also Familiar Linux and OpenSimpad going around, because people were, this is sort of the dawn of embedded computing on Linux. And there was a lot of excitement and a lot of people doing this, you know, as sort of spare time projects, you know, hobbies and things like that. So by 2005, Richard Purdy had created a fork in a Subversion repo while he was working at OpenHand, and that was around 2005. I probably showed up circa 2007, roughly then. I was doing software radio work at Virginia Tech and ended up doing a project where we were getting a software radio stack running on an OMAP 1, and I needed a build system. So I found OpenEmbedded as being the first thing that would build something that booted. So that's how I got to OpenEmbedded, is basically it was the first thing I tried that worked. So we had a stand at FOSDEM 2007, which was quite exciting. I think it was the first effort that the project had made to sort of promote itself. You know, at that point, it was just growing organically. People would notice it and pick it up. By 2008, we'd formed a German EV that basically gave us access to having a bank account. And around this time, MontaVista had come out with MontaVista Linux 6 based on OpenEmbedded. And Dennis had asked me why I, you know, highlighted this one, because there were a lot of people doing commercial OpenEmbedded work at this time. Many of the early founders had gone on to working for companies, doing Linux distributions, using OpenEmbedded. You know, basically the hobbyists all started getting jobs in industry. And the reason I highlight MontaVista is one day on IRC, somebody's like, you know, hey, you're sort of one of the board members for this OpenEmbedded organization. Can we talk to you about basing a commercial product on it? So I ended up having like a 30-minute phone call with an executive at MontaVista. It happened to be in a parking lot, in a hotel parking lot in Scottsdale, because I was doing some work for a company there at that point. And basically is like, do you think anyone's going to mind if we base a product on it? And I'm like, I don't think so. You know, you guys, you know, we certainly are aware that you have people working on it. And you seem to be good corporate citizens, and, you know, basically thank you for asking, and I don't see any problem. So they were sort of the one that reached out and made an impression on me as being very good corporate citizens. So some pictures from those days. You can see, for those of you who remember Kuhn, he's on the left. Richard Purdy is in the middle, a very young Richard Purdy. This is 2007 FOSDEM. And this is the stand, and basically developers get together and start working on problems. And on the right is Holger Freither, whose name I probably mispronounced. So that's FOSDEM 2007. For those of you that were there, this was in the H building. It was a very narrow hallway. It was very crowded. And it was a very exciting experience for a lot of us, because it was one of the first times that we had a chance to get together in person. And around that time, for those of you who remember, OpenMoco was an open source phone. Basically, the intent was to make an open phone, and they based their software stack on OpenEmbedded. And this is Sean giving a talk on OpenMoco at the Embedded Room at FOSDEM. And for those of you who go to FOSDEM, this is in the AW building. You will realize that this classroom is woefully overoccupied. And this year is probably one of the years that led to room capacity limits being strictly enforced, because I think the fire marshal noticed that we were way overpacking rooms. So there was a lot of excitement, in the mid-late 2000s. So in 2010, it was sort of the last of the ELCEs run strictly by Tim Bird. As sort of a tradition for embedded computing in those days, it was sorry, cat. All right, excuse me, the cat has disrupted things. I'll speak to him afterwards. So it's typically a woefully overcrowded event, and at a keynote or one of the big receptions, underneath the Concorde, the Yocto Project is announced to the world. And this came as a surprise to many OpenEmbedded developers in the room at the time. And we like to say that this is the first Linux Foundation collaborative projects, which they now seem to turn out, dozens a year. And the key focus of the Yocto project was to provide an organization for corporate entities to join. The Linux Foundation is a very corporate-facing organization. And it basically gave them a tool to recruit more members. There was some wrangling how to sort out the relationship between OpenEmbedded and the Yocto project. Like I said, this is sort of the first time the Linux Foundation had tried to do this, and they have a lot more boilerplate documents in place now to do this. So we sort of had to work all this out over a period of a year or so, how this was all going to work. And eventually, for a while, we were an actual member, and eventually we became a technical partner. Because it became confusing having us being a member who wasn't paying dues, and it just got silly. As a result, we have a representative on the Yocto Project governing board. So we sit at the meetings with all the corporate partners. One of the side impacts of this is we've ended up with 2 technical steering committees. The OpenEmbedded Technical Steering Committee is appointed entirely by the members of the OpenEmbedded organization, and the Yocto Project Technical Steering Committee is 3 members appointed by or selected by the Yocto Project Governing Board and 2 selected by OpenEmbedded. And I'm sure somebody is filling out in chat if I got that wrong. And yes, it's confusing, and we're sorry, but when you're the first at something, not everything is perfect. So that was 2010. And so this is 11 years ago. So okay. So OpenEmbedded is basically, since it's a person-based organization, there is a board of directors, I believe they're called in our documents we're working with at the moment. That's me at the top with where my term expires, Dennis, John Mason, and Jan Simone. If you notice, some of our terms have expired and we haven't reelected ourselves or had an election, excuse me. It seems like nobody actually wants to be on the board, so elections tend to not be very controversial. The past couple of years have been a bit hectic and disruptive. So we are aware that we need to run an election. We have a 5-member technical steering committee, and we just got through running their election. And that would be Bruce, John, Joshua, Paul, and Richard. So they have 2-year terms. And they sort of provide the just to make sure that we're not going off the rails technically. So we have all this organization. So what really changed as a result of the Yocto project creation? in the good old days, you basically had a lot of individuals working on the project, and there was, technical leadership was sort of who's doing, basically you got technical leadership by doing stuff. And this is great for some things and maybe not so great for other things. And OpenEmbedded Classic, which you can still find the repo on the OpenEmbedded GitHub page, it was basically one layer for all recipes. And yes, I know about collections, which was basically the beginning of layers, but it was basically one enormous repo with many versions of the same recipe, and it was becoming a mess. As everyone was drawing on the same thing, so it had to reflect everyone's needs. And this is both good and bad. At least you didn't have to go hunting for layers to find things. But at the same time, you never knew if the collection was going to parse. So pretty much anyone with any talent whatsoever had push access. So this basically meant recipes would get tested on your particular build configuration pushed, and then fail and break somebody else's build, and they would push fixes that would break your build, and they would have arguments. So basically there was no central testing for a defined set of configurations. So that would lead to a lot of frustration because nothing worked. Also, there was no concept of release. People would pick random hashes, create forks. Sorry, I'm not watching chat, but I see the thing blinking. So people would basically fork things as OpenHand had done. We had a lot of good relations with OpenHand. Richard would come to meetings and concepts would flow back and forth. But at this point, everyone was frustrated. So we used the formation of the Yocto project to start to work on some process improvements. So we created OpenEmbedded Core with a subset of recipes. So today OpenEmbedded Core will basically build Sato. Sato being what was an OpenHand product at the time. And it exists at this point, not so much as something to base product on, but as a testable basis. It's something that is testable. The collections concept was formalized into the layer concept, and the OpenEmbedded repo was started to be broken up into logical collections of recipes. Certainly a lot of learning in how to split layers up and how to manage layers has been going on over the past 10 years. OpenEmbedded Core is now testing patches before the merge. This is where the Yocto project providing the auto builder support is basically, it's a lot of money to fund the auto builder to get test builds done in a reasonable amount of time. And if you go to the Yocto project, technical meetings, Richard is always talking about problems with the auto builder. It's a hard problem. We've also formalized on a system of 2 releases per year. And the Yocto project is now providing financial support to extend releases occasionally to have multi-year, up to like 4-year support, something like that. So that basically the concept of the LTS, which had traditionally been done by the software companies, the project is now also trying to provide long-term support. So what's good about this system? The core layers build consistently. OpenEmbedded Core at any particular hash basically builds for a lot of configurations you can come up with. The job market for developers is incredible. Last night in the happy hour, somebody was like, figuring there's maybe 1,000 people who know how to build embedded Linux distributions for hardware. I follow the LinkedIn jobs boards fairly closely. I have alerts sent to me listing jobs, and it's just constantly people requesting OpenEmbedded and Yocto project experience. Layers are available for an incredible spectrum of software. If you go to layers.openembedded.org, you can start searching, and you can pretty much find a recipe for anything you want. That's not to say that it's a good recipe, but it'll certainly get you a starting point and is a way to help build community around specific pieces of software. And the good thing is you can do anything you want with this. I mean, it's amazing to me what people have done with OpenEmbedded. I mean, there are people moving into containers, just all sorts of different directions. And it's really great to see people using, this work to support an incredible variety of needs. So the bad, you can do anything you want, which leads to a lot of work for consultants, quite frankly. We have, board support packages are a constant sort of source of pain, uneven. A lot of people don't seem to have got the orthogonal concept of machine distribution and image, which is why I harp on it a lot. So the freedom to do anything you want is also a downside. Error reporting can be confusing. I'm sure we've all looked at errors and like, how the heck did that happen? So interpreting error messages is a continuing challenge. We make progress, but we're reporting build errors out of random build systems and random vendor software. And it's pretty interesting, the variety of stuff you can get. I mean, I literally get failures that if I hadn't spent an hour or two debugging them, there's literally no way to recognize what had happened. You can end in some really weird situations. Richard has hinted at this sometime this week. We still have usability issues. We're trying to make progress on them, but you get into a lot of backward compatibility issues. If you look at the override syntax discussion, people are concerned with supporting multiple layers with time. And if we make syntax changes that aren't backward compatible, that causes problems in their support systems. So where do we go from here? We've got a constant discussion on what features we need. We always talk about what the one setup tool to rule them is, which I think is an unsolvable problem, but that's just me. Some of us have been around for a long time, and we need to get, new people involved, new people to do maintenance. We need to make sure that the bus factor is not 1 in some areas. The number of people that look inside BitBake is very small. So please, get involved with the core project. We need more than just users. One of the problems we've had over the past 10 years is the explosive growth of people using this without an explosive growth of the people that do core development. And that's creating tremendous load for the people at the center who know things. I mean, I'm literally basically telling people, no, I'm not going to look at your problems now. And they're offering me money, and I just can't, keep up with it. And, we have this problem. We have all these people who download Apache tarball, install it, ship a product based on it. How do we communicate with these people? How do we start to push best practices out to end users? This event helps, but, there are only 100 people here, 150 people here. And I probably know a good number of them, but we need to be able to reach, to the ends of the limbs, basically. It just branches out and turns up in unusual places. And we need to get, a better sense of community, all the way down to the very corners of the user base. So membership, OpenEmbedded is a membership organization. It's open to individuals, regardless of corporate affiliation, and what is basically anyone with an interest in OpenEmbedded. You don't have to be a developer. You don't have to be a user. It's, we want to find, genuine interest, because we realize there are a lot of ways that people can help, grow the community and improve the software. And I have to talk about benefits of membership, because people expect membership to have benefits like, American Express, but that's not really what the deal is here. You don't, with open embedded membership, you don't get exclusive access to features. You don't get exclusive access to Git repos. It's basically, as for, technically speaking, you have the same access as anyone, regardless of membership status. But what you have as a member is sort of a responsibility to help grow the project, work with people, grow the community, improve the system, look at running for the board, look at running for the TSC, attending meetings. The TSC meets regularly. Membership meetings are less regular. Attend developer meetings, and let us know what you think and how we can make things better. So if you want to become a member of Open Embedded, send us a paragraph of who you are and how you're involved with the project. As it's very easy for me to vote for people I know, because I know all that, but I like to see people write it out and what they think. And it also helps, I just don't want to have people approving, lists of names. We have a board.
Interrupting here. I do want to point out that there is a benefit of being a member, and it's that you get to vote on the TSC, the board, and the TSC members that are on the Yocto project. So there is benefits.
Okay. All right. I think I sort of, danced around that, but yes, John is right. There is a benefit, although elections, please vote. And you also get to vote for new members, although I am open to having that changed. And I was reading the documents the other day and was actually surprised we hadn't changed it already. So please become a member and become active in the community, and please vote in the various elections. As individuals, we can't join the Yocto project, but we can certainly encourage our companies to join the Yocto project. And this, for your company, the benefits situation is very similar to the membership in Open Embedded. There's not a huge amount of unique stuff you get access to. There's the advisory board meeting you can attend. And there's occasional technical calls that you can attend. But practically speaking, there's no secret access either with Yocto project member. And Richard is very, I think, proud of the fact that the technical decisions are run completely open. So there's no sort of wrangling behind the scenes that goes on. But having your company join the Yocto project, it helps support developers. It helps support the infrastructure, advocacy. Many of you are here because of the work of the advocacy team, reaching out at events and things like that. They also do community support. So if someone needs travel money to speak at an event or something, there's a budget to help support people doing work that supports the Yocto project. There's budgets to support events like these, which is helpful when we have to run physical events where the costs can be much higher. And there's the tedious administration and legal stuff, of which I have seen far too much of in the past 10 years, but it exists. And it is good to be able to pay people to take care of very, very tedious work. And you get recognition for your company. You can point, it's like, we are an active member of this community. We're just not, sitting on the sidelines, consuming open source. We're contributing and we're helping. And if you want to learn more about Yocto project membership and probably a much better description of why you should join, talk to Nico, and he gave me permission to put his email address there.